Hi everyone. As I just said, what we'll do right now is look into the main results of our report into food tech investments in Europe, European food tech startups. So first, I would like to thank our sponsors, the VC fund Eutopia, the consulting firm Kea, Nestlé, which we all know a bit about, and Vitagora, which is a cluster of agribusinesses in the east of France and in Paris region. So first I will introduce ourselves, DigitalFoodLab. So basically, what is DigitalFoodLab? It's the European consultancy specialized in food tech. So with Jeremy, we are food tech experts, and we are really focused into this ecosystem. We've been working into food tech startups for 10 years. We've created one of the first food tech startups in Europe. And right now what we do is we work with big corporates, SMEs, and also startups in the food industry. And we help them identify and act on food tech opportunities. And so, as I said, our main, I would say, differentiation point is that we've been ourselves entrepreneurs and that we kind of well understand what is this happening in this ecosystem. As said in the introduction, we've been working on this report with the help of 4 sponsors. Eutopia, which was one of the first European and French investors into this ecosystem of food tech, Kea, which is a strategy consulting firm, Nestlé, the largest would say food and beverage company in the world, and Vitagora, which is an agribusiness cluster. So first of all, what is food tech? Food tech is the ecosystem made of all the startups acting on the value chain of food. So from agriculture to delivery, retail, food science, which are transformed products, processed products, food service, which are all the startups working into reinventing the restaurant, building the restaurant of the future, coaching startups. So there you can find startups working on DNA tests or apps working and helping you to make the right choice in the supermarkets, and obviously delivery startups, which are delivering you food, either restaurant or groceries. So why have we done this report? Which I think is a good question to just ask. First is, it's not the first one. We have done 2 previous reports on the European and French food tech ecosystems, and we aim to provide a consistent and reliable source of information about the European food tech ecosystem. So with our definition of food tech, what is it and how investments are growing. Then we aim to give information about the ecosystem to corporates and investors in order to help them understand what's happening and motivate them to invest into startups. And finally, our second goal is to showcase the best startups and trends of this ecosystem. So I have divided this presentation into 4 parts. First, we'll look at investments. So I would say this graph sums up the conclusion of our report. First, in blue, you have the investments in European food tech startups, cumulative each year, and you have in gray the number of deals in the European food tech ecosystem. So what can we say about that? First, as you can see, there is a strong surge in terms of investments, even if we have 1 year up, 1 year down. And we also see, which is a bit strange, but we'll look at that later, that the number of deals is decreasing, and have been so for 2 years. So what is really interesting in this data is that we have a new generation of startups. So if you look in blue, you have the investment, the share of the investment that was made by this group of unicorns. So as you can see in 2015, this small group of 1 billion plus startups were accounting for more than 80% of the investment. And last year, this share was only 23%. So that means that the bulk of the investment has gone into a new set of startups. We can see that if we look at these graphs, on the left, you have in blue the investment in the top investment in 2019, and in gray on the right, the top 10 investments in 2018. So as you can see, we have a completely new generation of startups. We have only Deliveroo, which was mentioned earlier, which is in this set of startups, and we have new ideas, new kind of startups working in products, in farming, in urban farming, but also in meal kits, etc. As you can see, startups are distributed pretty evenly in the various domains. On the left, you have the startup distribution scheme in Europe. So as you can see, we have 24% of the active startups in Europe which are working in delivery, 32% in food science. So it's pretty impressive. And on the middle, you have the distribution of the deals. On the right, the distribution of the investment, so the euros invested. What is pretty kind of obvious when we look at these graphs is the fact that 24% of the startups, 20% of the deals are amounting for 66% of the investment. So money goes to delivery. Money has already go to this ecosystem and continue to go there. So delivery startups are still attracting the bulk of money. So that's the first point. And second point is obviously the 32% of active startups which are in food science, so new product, direct to consumer products, etc., which only raise 5% of the total amount of investment in European food tech startups. So that's pretty low. And I would say, contrary to what we've seen in the US and in other countries, we don't have in Europe a beyond meat effect. So even after last year surge in demand for plant-based products, for alternative meats, we don't see a lot of investments in this kind of startups in Europe. Then I have made a small focus in delivery. You have much more data in the report itself. What you can find here is the distribution of investments year after year in delivery startups in Europe, but by subdomains. So what you can see is, until recently, restaurant delivery. So startups like Deliveroo, Delivery Hero, were obviously the ones which were raising the most money. So here in dark blue. And what we see is in lighter blue, marketplaces. So startups delivering groceries, which are rising really fast and taking the bulk of money. That's not European specific. It's something that is already happening in a lot of the ecosystem, especially in the US, or in India and China. So if we want to compare Europe to the rest of the world, as you can see in this graph using AgFunders data to have a view of the investment globally, what we can see is Europe's investment, even if they are increasing, they are still accounting for a very small share of world's total investment in food tech startups. So today it's like 40%, 14%, which is pretty low. So second part, we'll look at the distribution of investment by geography, because as you may know, Europe is not that united. things happening in one country doesn't tell about what's happening elsewhere. So here is the distribution of investment in food tech startups in each country, top 10 countries in Europe. So as you can see, we have a pretty clear leader, which is the UK, with more than 700 million euros invested in food tech startups. And then we have a group of 4 countries, France, Spain, Netherlands, and Germany. And finally, I would say small followers. What you can see is that it's absolutely not a ranking by population or GDP, but totally random ranking, and you have this kind of special set of countries which have stronger food and tech ecosystems. One of the big surprises of this report was finding that when you combine the 4 Nordics countries, which are Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, you have the 4th food tech ecosystem, almost equal to the Netherlands. So small countries, but even combined together, they are much smaller than, for example, Germany, but they have a really strong ecosystem, which combined together makes a lot of sense. So really interesting to look at this ecosystem as one complete and total ecosystem. Then what we've looked at is where this food tech ecosystem were located. And as for other tech ecosystems, they are pretty much city driven. If you take only London, Berlin, Amsterdam, Paris, and Barcelona, and all the startups located in these cities, you have 66% of all the food tech investment in Europe. And if you add, I would say, 3 second tier countries and cities like Stockholm, Milan, and Zurich, you can go to 72% of all the European food tech investments. Then I've made a focus on France and French food tech because it's kind of specific in Europe. It's interesting because it's the only top 5 countries which has not a unicorn. We don't have in France any clear leader. And so we've divided the investments in blue with the 20 million plus deals and in gray for the rest. And as you can see, the rest is pretty constant and has been so for like 4 years. And we have a surge in big deals, which are finally driving the French food tech ecosystem, which with deals, for example, in insect, which is, as its name says, building factories to grow insects for farming. So in France, what is really specific is that delivery is really underrepresented, and there is a strong focus on food service in agtech. And that can be seen in the top 10 deals in France, which are all in this ecosystem. So insect, which is in agtech, with Luncher, which are working in food service, and then the other ones. And so pretty much no players in typical delivery, because even the top 9 and top 10 are players which are in the broader category of delivery, but which are not delivery startups as we know them. So we don't have delivery-like startups in France. We've made a comparison between France and the UK. So in these wheels, what do you see? In the internal wheel, you have the number of deals, and the external wheel, you have the amounts invested. So it's pretty obvious when you look both sides, France on the left and the UK on the right, that the UK's investments are pretty much dominated by delivery, which is, again, not a surprise, because on the 700 million plus investment, 500 were only one deal investment from Amazon to Deliveroo. So third, really quick on distribution by stage. What you can see on this graph is on blue, you have the investments by stage of maturity of startups in 2019, and the same thing in gray for 2018. I would say the big surprise is, okay, we have much more investment in later stage in 2019, but we have less investment in early stages. So it's pretty surprising, but we see a concentration of investment in later stage, and even at, I would say, the detriment of early stage startups. And what we've also looked is the median deal at each stage. And for example, if we take the example of Series A, we see again an increase of 10%. So the median deal in 2019 was 10% bigger than the deal in 2018, which is pretty consistent over the year. But we can expect it to decrease after the current COVID-19 crisis. And finally, we'll look at how corporates have been involved into this ecosystem of food tech. So they have been much more involved last year than they were previously. So they've been involved as investors. So I've taken a few examples. For example, Amazon has invested in the UK startup Deliveroo. You have Coca-Cola investor in the French startup called alcohol delivery. Heineken invested in a French startup Galia, which is building a new range of beers, and more maybe I would say unexpected luxury brand Chanel investing in Sulapak, Finnish startups working on packaging, sustainable packaging. But what is really new is a surge of acquisition. A few examples, the US group Foodspring, which has acquired German startup Foodspring. You have Diageo, the UK company, which is the world leader in spirits, which has acquired Sidlip, a UK-based startup working on spirits without alcohol, so the distillated products without any alcohol. French retailer Carrefour acquiring Dashbox. So you see a lot of acquisition in many fields. So that, I would say, is really interesting for the European FoodTech ecosystem. And finally, we can't conclude without talking a bit about COVID-19 and the current crisis. Let's see it on a bright spot. First, what we can say is we do think it will accelerate the transition toward a few movements that we were already seeing. For example, on the left, you have the startups in Europe, Supermercato 24, which is the equivalent in Italy and Poland of America's Instacart. So the crisis is obviously increasing their business and their opportunities in other countries in Europe. Another example, Europe was really strong in terms of startups working into drones and robots. For example, Starship Technologies or Mana in Ireland. And all these startups were limited to experiments in universities. And right now, finally, the robots and drones are into the streets. So I would say that means barriers that were mostly psychological are taken away, and these startups can finally rise. Another less positive impact will be certainly on startups working in food service. All the startups providing payment systems to retailers, to restaurants will have issues, I think, in the next couple of months. And so that's conclude this presentation, this webinar. And I was wondering if you had any questions about it. And if so, please do send us an email and we'll answer as fast as possible. But right now, what you can do is download the report on our website. It is freely available, and that's due to our sponsors, which have helped us make this available. Thank you.